Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Foundations.
Because there never was a Palestinian nation. It was a region named by Hadrian as like a knife in the guts of the Jewish people after their ancient enemies, the Philistines, which at that time no longer existed. So there never was a Palestinian nation or people.
Foundations. Understanding the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. With Robbo Robinson and Mandy Warby.
In our last program, we learned about the prophecy in Ezekiel 37 about the Valley of Dry Bones being resurrected, and that the dry bones was a promise by God to bring his Jewish people back to life and restored to their ancient homeland. This time we're going to look at the miracle of Israel's rebirth.
Can I just tell you, Robbo, we've been talking about some pretty dark parts of church history and their treatment of the Jewish people, and it's been hard yakka going through a lot of that. But today I'm actually really super excited because we get to look at God's promises to his people and how he has actually fulfilled his promises and hasn't forsaken them. So we looked at the Valley of Dry Bones prophecy in Ezekiel 37, but now I want to look at the sequence of events and how God has fulfilled his promises. Okay, so from the mid-1800s, Jewish people were returning to what was then called Palestine. It was a region without borders. It didn't have a capital. Without a government, it didn't have a national flag. It didn't have a national anthem, had no independent currency. But the Jews went back, began to re-establish it. Now, there had always been a tiny Jewish presence in the land, an unbroken Jewish presence for 3,800 years. And the Jews brought this barren wasteland from absent landowners for really highly inflated prices, but they bought it. And it was from this really tiny but significant influx of Jews that the kibbutzim movement grew. They drained the swamps, they worked the land, they built communities, and they planted millions and millions of trees. Now, at the end of World War II, the stragglers and survivors of the Holocaust tried desperately to make their way to Palestine. Most of it was very subversive because the British refused them entry, and those that did got incarcerated. World War II ended on the 2nd of September 1945, and 2 years and 8 months later, and this is a really important number, after only 2 years and 8 months from the Holocaust, these survivors made their way to Palestine and the state of Israel was reborn.
Well, let's go back and actually look at the timeline that led up to that point. All right, so if we go back, obviously we read about Israel and Judah, the land of Israel in the Bible. Israel was conquered and occupied by Assyria in 732 BC. And then it was Judah that was conquered and occupied by Babylon, and that was between 587 and 538 BC. Then they were conquered by Persia between 538 and 332 BC. Then we have the Greek and Hellenistic period from 333 through to 64 BC, so we're getting close to the time of Christ at this point. Rome then were the occupying force from 64 BC through until 390 AD.
And then from there, Rome kind of morphed into the Byzantine Empire. That was from 390 to 634 AD. Then you had the conquering and occupying from the early Muslim Arabs, the Crusader period, and the Mongol period. That was a big span between 634 to 1258 AD. Then you had the Mamluk invasion and occupation between 1258 and 1516 AD. And then you had the Ottoman Empire, which conquered, occupied the land between 1516 to 1917 AD.
So that's around the time, obviously, of World War I, 1917.
Yep.
And it was at that point that martial law between the British and there's a French mandate as well. So that's between 1917 and 1922.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was at that point in 1917, the Balfour Declaration was made. That was November the 2nd, 1917. The Balfour Declaration states that His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jews, communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country.
So then after the British mandate, as you said, between 1922 and 1948, Israel was reborn in 1948. Now, I have to mention here that what you don't see in that history is a Palestinian invasion and occupation, because there never was a Palestinian nation. It was a region named that by Emperor Hadrian. and it was named by Hadrian as like a knife in the guts of the Jewish people after their ancient enemies, the Philistines, which at that time no longer existed.
Yeah.
So there never was a Palestinian nation or people. So under the British Mandate, the entire landmass of Israel and Jordan was originally supposed to be given to the Jews for homeland. And Winston Churchill, under the British Mandate, severed 2/3 of that land allocation for the Jews and made it a homeland for the Arab population, giving them what they asked for. He called it Transjordan, which today is just Jordan. Okay, the remaining 1/3 was for a Jewish state, which the Muslim world to this day is fighting to gain 100% control of, with the goal of exterminating the Jews once again.
So that's the timeline from Bible times right through to 1948, which is when Israel was reborn as a nation. And there's a prophetic passage that talks about that.
Isaiah 66 verses 6 to 13, it says, "The sound of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, the voice of the Lord who fully repays his enemies. Before she was in labour, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day, or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion was in labour, she gave birth to her children. Shall I bring to the time of birth and not cause delivery, says the Lord? Shall I who cause delivery shut up the womb, says your God? Rejoice with Jerusalem, and be glad with her. All you who love her, rejoice for joy with her, all you who mourn for her. That you may feed and be satisfied with the consolation of her bosom, that you may drink deeply and be delighted with the abundance of her glory. For thus says the Lord, behold, I'll extend peace to her like a river, and the glory of the Gentiles like a flowing stream. Then you'll feed, on her sides shall you be carried, and be dandled on her knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I'll comfort you, and you shall be comforted in Jerusalem."
That's an amazing passage, and it talks about the birth of a nation in a geographic location, but then goes on to say that this birth will result in the live births of a people who would be nurtured and comforted in their ancestral home, personified in Jerusalem as their mother.
Absolutely. So, but right at the beginning of that passage, the birth is completely unnatural. It's abnormal. It's like it's back to front, completely back to front. It says before she was in labour, she gave birth, and before her pain came, she delivered a child. Now, Robbo, I have had 3 male children. So I've had 3 pregnancies and 3 births, and I can tell you something. Any mother will tell you this. Your pains start very small, very weak, and far apart.
Yeah.
And then over a period of time, they get more painful, they get closer together, and they last longer until you get to birth, that place of birth, and then the pains are, I can only say they're like unbearable. They bleed together. Yeah. They last a whole lot longer. And then you have the birth, the pains stop, labour is over, and then you've got the joy. But what Isaiah was describing in Isaiah 66 was the complete reverse, that you have this birth and then all of a sudden the pains start.
Yeah, that's a bizarre thing, isn't it? That it's actually the opposite of what we see naturally. And at one time and in one day, that this would all take place. And then the labour pains actually begin.
Exactly. But God makes a promise, because he comes out of this and he says, and this is really crucial, it's a very dangerous point of the birth, and God made a promise. He said, shall I bring to the point of birth and not cause delivery? Shall I who cause delivery shut up the womb? So God made a promise against all odds, with no possibility of human success, and God brought forth the delivery of his Jewish people out of the ashes of the Holocaust 2 years and 8 months after the end of World War II, and the Jewish people now have a homeland from which they can defend themselves after 2,000 years of persecution and hatred and malice and violent pogroms, humiliation, degradation, almost near extermination. Out of the ashes of Ezekiel 37 and the Valley of Dry Bones, God has rebirthed his nation and his people exactly the way he promised he would through Isaiah 66.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, we're going to look in our next episode at the natural fulfillment of this prophecy and how it actually has played out, just as we do read in Isaiah 66. We'll do that next time on Foundation.
This has been Foundations, a look at the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. For study notes, resources and more, see vision.org.au/foundations.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.